The bases dropped on another edition of Soccer Down here. It's April 1st. It is a Wall Pass Wednesday. That means we're taking your questions wherever you want to take those questions. You want to get into history. You want to get into the current situation as soccer tries to figure out what the world's going to look like in a month or two or three or however long it takes, because that's kind of where we all are around the world. And you've got different leagues, different organizations meeting, trying to figure it all out. We'll catch you up on all the latest. But your questions on a Wall Pass Wednesday can take us there. They can take us to historical stuff. They can take us to tactics. They can take us wherever you want to take it. It's your show. That's what a Wall Pass Wednesday is all about. So, Jason Longshore, John Nelson with you this morning. And John is complaining about it being early. Like we don't usually start the show at 9 o'clock.
Well, it's just early in general. I'm not a morning person. Never have been.
Yeah, but 9 doesn't qualify as early. I'm sorry. It doesn't. You can not be a morning person. That's fine. I get that. And sometimes I'm like that. Not all the time, but sometimes. But 9's not early. It's just not. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've never been a morning person. Never. And usually, for some strange reason, it's like the body and the brain kind of start working about 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
That could
really
late,
something.
John. That's a problem.
Mm-hmm. It's pacing.
No,
That's how I look at it.
No, it's not pacing because you're not up till midnight.
Is there a boss here?
No,
not much of one, Romy.
Jeez. Only been doing this show for like 3.5 years now.
I know.
9 o'clock. Just saying.
I answer the bell in various stages of awareness, but no, never been a morning person.
Jeez. 9's like barely even qualifying to talk about being a morning person. So it's a good thing we haven't moved the show up to start at 7 o'clock.
Well, we have done that we've done that in the past. I mean, we've done
like
8
once, and it was bad because you were asleep.
And that shocks people. That shocks you.
I mean, that's why we don't do it.
But now
move it back to 2 o'clock. So John is in fine form.
You're usually getting up about 6:30 in the morning.
Well, no, when I'm preparing for the show, because I usually put in a couple of hours of prep and eating some breakfast and catching up on the news and whatever topics we want to dig into, and also putting a little bit of study time in for upcoming games. So typically, I mean, on a normal show day, that's kind of how it goes for me. But on a quarantined edition, there's not as much prep to do. So I'm sleeping in a little bit to like 7:15 or so these days.
Good.
It's not that good. It's like 45 minutes difference. It's not that big of a deal.
Still, but hey, that 45 minutes. Are you going to bed any earlier?
It depends. Some days, like there's been some days where it's like there's absolutely no reason to stay up. So I'm gonna go to sleep. And then there's some where if I get into a movie or get into watching an old game or playing FIFA or something to distract myself, then I'll stay up a little bit later. It's all over the place. It's not consistent at all.
How's your FIFA going, by the way?
I mean, I'm getting better at it. I thought about throwing the controller out the window last night when the referees hosed me. I was very disappointed with
Wait. They hosed you last night?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm playing the LA Galaxy in the Open Cup quarterfinals, and Pitti gets tripped in the box, no penalty. Joseph just gets like run over in the box, no penalty, and then the Galaxy score in stoppage time to knock me out of the Open Cup. I was furious.
Oh, I mean, that's just. I mean, I would be
no VAR in FIFA either. I was irate. I was looking for Mark Geiger to save me.
Well, so you had quick trigger Chris Penso?
No, there was no trigger. It was zero trigger. There was no Chris Penso involved. That's for sure.
So I'd be at the point where I'd be throwing the controller down on the floor, spiking it, making loud noises, freaking out the neighbors, that kind of stuff, if that was what was going on last night.
I had some choice words for the video referee that was not using replay. I was very upset with him. And then the next match in league play might have run up the score a little bit on Seattle. It was necessary. The guys felt better after that one. So
run it up, Herman. Leave no doubt.
Yeah, 7-0 at CenturyLink's always fun.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Now, I do have a couple of things on the list for Walpassy Wednesday kind of questions.
Okay.
Well, I mean, you want me to save them, and you want to go onto the timeline, or do you want me to go ahead and put them out on the floor for everybody?
Go ahead and put them on the floor.
Okay. This spun off from a conversation that friend of the show Kevin Egan was having with folks, and it was discussing your greatest goals bracket, which we need to get into because I think we've passed another section and we've
it's not
trimmed.
done yet. You can't keep up with this. Jesus. We talked about it yesterday. It's not done yet. You can get your final voting in right now in the Elite Eight. You got about an hour and a half to get it in.
That's what I'm saying. We got out of it yesterday, and now we're into another one.
No. We're in the same one we were yesterday.
Well, wait
that
a
was
second.
the whole thing we talked about yesterday.
I thought we were trimming it that we only had an hour yesterday in the second hour of the show.
No.
Okay, well then we have an hour and a half remaining in this particular round of the bracket. So get your votes in now.
This is why we don't do a 7 a.m. show, y'all.
So get your votes in before the end of the show when it comes to trimming.
All right.
About par. Yeah. But, so get your votes in before the end of the show so we can continue to trim number one seeds out of brackets.
No, you're not trying to do that. That's not the goal here. The goal is to pick the greatest goal, and if people want to pick a different goal than the seeded ones, that's fine. That's a vote. It's democracy in action. That's what we're here for.
Vote, people. And it is one Twitter handle, one vote, correct?
Yes, that's how Twitter votes work.
Okay. But this is an offshoot of what you're doing. And what's the follow-up bracket that you're considering at the moment?
Well, we're going to do this in starting at 10 o'clock when Mike Conti joins us. It will be the greatest win in Atlanta United history, and that's what came off of a conversation yesterday because it was the anniversary of Atlanta's win in Minnesota in frigid conditions with 10 men for the majority of the match, and it was a huge win at the time. It was, I do believe at the time, it was the greatest win in Atlanta United history. It was huge. And it sparked, I think, this team having a different kind of belief in itself and winning games ugly and winning games when things go against you. So we're going to do a bracket of the Atlanta United greatest wins in club history. And it's the same. Great can be defined differently by different people. And we're going to try to come up with, for between 10 and about 10:25 when Mike has to leave us, we're going to try to come up with the seeds for that bracket that will start probably over the weekend.
Okay. So off of that discussion and off of the current bracket discussion, folks were going to Kevin Egan and reminding Kevin of one of his calls when it comes to one of those particular goals. It was still Villalba, and then he scores. Mm-hmm. So the question that I have for you and for Mike and for Kevin, if he's listening, when people walk up to you and want to talk about Atlanta United, is there a particular call that they sit there and they talk to you about more than others? Is there one that they sit there and it's like, man, I loved when you did X? Is there one of those that is first and foremost in people's minds when they come up and shake your hand?
Well, for Mike and Kevin, yeah. I mean, that's what they do. For me, it's not what I do. So, not really. I mean, once we start talking, usually there's laughs about either the Lorenowitz goal or the Joseph goal in San Jose, where I broke character in the background on the goal. But in general, we're talking about games and moments and things, because that's that's where I'm at in the space. Where Mike and Kevin are, it's about how they called a certain moment.
But yeah, I was trying to see if when folks come up and talk to you, if there's one particular moment that triggers with them, and it was those two. I didn't know if there was a third or if there was another one that popped into their head, whether it was the MLS Cup final or something like that. That's not the first thing
people come up to me about. I mean, people will come up to me to talk about tactics or, lineup choices or this player, that player, stuff like that. That's where, my conversations usually are.
Okay. So when Mike comes on at 10 o'clock, the beginning of hour number 2, I'll ask him that same question. So that was the first thing that popped into my head this morning.
What was the other thing? Because it sounds like there were at least a couple things that popped into your head.
There were. Did you see on the Football Bible account, and seeing a particular player's name piqued my interest in wanting to ask you about this? And Football Bible apparently found a quote from Diego Maradona, where Maradona said that the greatest player, I'm trying to get the phraseology correct here, and because I don't want to mess this up, where if Twitter would behave and I could actually scroll down and read the quote. Yes, and no, it has nothing to do with Kevin De Bruyne. Let's see. It has to do with Maradona's thoughts on Ronaldo. Okay, quote. Diego Maradona said,
first off?
The original.
Okay,
not
Brazilian
Cristiano.
Ronaldo.
Brazilian Ronaldo.
Okay.
Quote from Diego Maradona. Ronaldo is the greatest striker of all time. Without injuries, he would have been the best player of all time. I have absolutely no doubt about this. He would have made the world forget about me and Pele.
Do we know when the quote was made?
Clicking on said quote to see if we can come up with any kind of a timestamp. But that was the quote that Football Bible brought out this morning.
Because that could have been an older quote that maybe Diego has different feelings now. He could still have the same feelings, and you could absolutely defend it. The injuries changed Brazilian Ronaldo's career completely. I mean, he was the almost perfect combination of technique, of flair, of power, of strength. I mean, he had all of it. But he only had it for a short period of time because as he started to have his body break down, he wasn't the same player. He was still a good player, a very good player, one of the best. But he wasn't the same player that, was called, the phenomenon. That was, he didn't play like a typical forward because he had all of it. I mean, it was like a running back with the foot skills of an elite soccer player. I mean, he was that powerful and strong and fast. So, yeah, if he had not had any injuries, if not especially the knee stuff, then, yeah, he could have ended up being that. Ultimately, he's not because of the injuries. And, you could play the what-if game about lots of different players or people for a lot of reasons. Diego is a prime example of that. If Diego hadn't had, he had injuries, but if he hadn't had his own personal demons, he would have been the greatest ever. And I still think he had maybe the greatest run of about 5 years ever because of what he did when he went to Napoli, took Argentina to a World Cup, got back to a World Cup final, won 2 league titles with Napoli, who had never won anything, and won a UEFA Cup. I mean, and they hadn't done anything after he left, for a long time. So I think that shows the effect he had at that short period of time. Over a long career of players who have retired, Pelé is the one until Messi retires. And I think when Messi retires, he's going to be right there. The only knock people will have comparing Messi's career to others will be the lack of a World Cup title. But what he's done at Barcelona is insane. I mean, his club career is by far the greatest. There's just really no question to me. But when you factor in the World Cup disappointments, then, people will take shots at that. I still think that Messi is going to end up being the greatest. Cristiano Ronaldo's right there in the conversation, and people on Team Ronaldo would argue that he's at least got a European championship, which he does. His club achievements are not the same level as Messi, but they're really, really good. He'll be in that top 10 for sure. I would say top 5 potentially. It's hard to compare Pelé to Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo because of the different eras. I mean, Santos didn't face the competition that Ronaldo and Messi have faced at the club level week in, week out, and in Europe in the Champions League. They just didn't. That's going to be the biggest difference, and that's why it's hard to compare. But in the modern time, for me, it's Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo second. Brazilian Ronaldo could have been that guy because, he's got 2 World Cup medals. He played in 1. He didn't play in 94, but he was in the squad. He's got the club achievements, but not at the same level as Cristiano or Messi. If he had stayed healthy, he would have achieved more. Could Brazil have won in 98 or in 2006 even if Ronaldo was the Ronaldo that we have seen at his best? Yeah, they could have. They could have added another World Cup trophy to the trophy case, and he could have added another medal, and he probably would have won more at the club level as well. But Diego's quote, I'd love to know when that was made to see if it's maybe changed with what Cristiano and what Messi have done. And they're different players. Cristiano's turned into that kind of player that you would compare straight up with Ronaldo in terms of being a number 9, but his career didn't start that way. Messi's more like a Maradona, honestly, and he's kind of a forward, kind of not.
Yeah, there was not a timestamp on the Football Bible quote, and there was no rabbit hole to go down to try to find one, but I just saw that. And since Maradona discussions on the show are, for me, one of the things that I always like to sit there and circle as an idea, that's why I wanted to bring it up.
What else we got on the timeline these days?
Irish Times. Did you see this? This is kind of
not.
where we are today. Irish Times had an article. A friendly between 2 lower league sides in Sweden had to be canceled on Monday after at least one bookmaker offered customers the opportunity to place money on the match. In Sweden, gatherings of no more than 50 people still allowed to take place, and 7th tier Eskilstuna FC and 8th tier Nashuta Go IF were hoping to get 90 minutes under their belts, forced to postpone after, quote, people from all over the world, end quote, started to contact players and coaching staff of the 2 teams. One of the team chairmen, Eskilstuna FC chairman Bengen Ozeron, told Fotbollskanalen, quote, all day yesterday, people rang our players and staff. They got in contact through social media. It was people from all around the world. They were saying things like, hope you lose, or good luck. There were more than 100 people doing it in under an hour. It's been chaos. It was not a fun day. We decided to cancel the game for the players' safety. You never know after people started contacting the players. They even contacted a coach in the same division we play in to check how we play and how we have played in the past. People even got in contact with some of our former players and asked about our starting lineup. It was sick, end quote.
I don't know the situation in Sweden right now in general with the virus, so my gut feeling is why in the world are they even thinking about playing a match?
Not on lockdown, borders remain open.
Say that again?
Not on lockdown. Countries not in lockdown. Borders remain open. Schools and gyms also open, with the Prime Minister asking the nation, quote, to behave as adults, end quote.
Yeah, that's the approach that usually doesn't work because most people aren't adults, as you can tell by the way this whole thing was handled. So, and I'm guessing there are bookmakers who are trying to find some money these days. So maybe that's why part of this had to do with it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a mess.
when you're looking at 7th tier and 8th tier teams, yeah. But in the example of this morning of where we are right now, that was one that came across my timeline.
Yeah, and anybody dropping an April Fool's joke right now needs to stop.
Yes,
I'm seeing
exactly.
a few popping up. It's like, really? Did you forget to turn off that scheduled tweet? It's been a while. You had time to do it. Come on. Oh, man. Ricky Ricardo chimes in on the greatest player debate. Says, for me, Pelé is like Jordan, and he just can't be touched, and Messi, Ronaldo are sitting together like Kobe and LeBron are. It's even more separate than that for me, because I think you can much closer compare Jordan with Kobe, LeBron than you can Pelé and Messi and Ronaldo. It's more like comparing Kobe and LeBron to Oscar Robertson and Bob Cousy, going back to a very different era of the game. It's hard just because of the game that Pelé played, and especially, not going to Europe. And at that time, a lot of players didn't. It was not common for South American players to go to Europe at that point. It wasn't the regular occurrence. So in Pelé's case, he didn't have that opportunity to play for Real Madrid, to play in Italy, to play in England. Reportedly, there were offers at different points, most late in his career, but the Brazilian government wouldn't let him go. There had to be a lot of negotiation between the New York Cosmos, and this was after Pelé had retired, to come play in the North American Soccer League, and the governments had to get involved.
Really?
It was to that degree. Yeah, Henry Kissinger was involved in that, and you had to convince the Brazilian government to do it, to allow it, and it was crazy. But that's a different time. That shows why it's so impossible to compare a player like Cristiano Ronaldo, who's played at 3 of the biggest clubs in the world and won at 3 different clubs and had a bunch of different challenges, and Lionel Messi, who plays in an era where I think the World Cup is more competitive than it was in Pelé's era, and also has played in a Champions League that is more competitive than the Copa Libertadores was in Pelé's era, and plays in a league that's more competitive than Brazil was in Pelé's era. So it's hard to compare. I would separate it further than Ricky Ricardo does. I would say it's even harder in this case to compare a Pelé, a George Best, a Eusebio, that era of soccer to today. Franz Beckenbauer, honestly it's almost like it's 3. I almost look at it in 3 different levels. Like, you have the pre-'80s era, you have the 80s and maybe into the 90s and maybe late in the 90s, and then you have the modern era. And they're almost like 3 separate things. It's hard to even overlap in those eras and compare player to player, team to team.
So even though I don't like to necessarily compare eras, I guess this is the best example of that for me. But if I was to lump all of these guys into one line, for me it would be Pelé, Maradona, Messi, Ronaldo. That'd be my 1, 2, 3, 4.
In terms of the overall career, for me, it's Messi, it's Cristiano Ronaldo, it's Pelé, and it's Maradona. Because Maradona had the shorter run of greatness. What Messi's done at Barcelona is absurd, and what he's done just as a player in that time is absurd. I think Cristiano Ronaldo has faced more challenges than Pelé did, and won a European championship with a lesser team than Pelé won World Cups with. And you want to compare the European Championships to the World Cup in the 16-team era, it's comparable. You can find a way to make that comparison valid. So I would put it that way. And Pelé's career is greater than Maradona's career because he, didn't get into suspensions for drugs, didn't have, as many of the injuries that Maradona did. He had a better career. But in terms of like a 5-year period of greatness, then it's probably Maradona for me, and then I'd have to think about which 5-year era I'm taking from Messi. But you could, even if you're shortening it to like a 5-year era, you might go Cristiano in the run that had the European Championship and 3 Champions Leagues. I mean, that's borderline unheard of. So you might even make that argument that it's up there ahead of whatever 5-year period you're going to take from Messi. But I'll still take Maradona's 5 years where he won a World Cup, got back to a final, and won 2 titles for Napoli and a UEFA Cup, because he did it with a club that had no success in their history at that level.
Yeah, for me, when I look at Pele, and we're doing the analogies for other sports, I mean, for me, Pele is like Hank Aaron. And then you sit there and you sort Maradona, Messi, and Ronaldo out into more modern era players.
But this is what I'm saying. Like, you're saying that like that he can't be touched, and I don't think that's fair to modern era players. They can be. I mean, it's harder to compare because what Hank Aaron faced and what, I'm not even going to go Barry Bonds, but take whatever current modern slugger you want to go with and compare it. It's you have to find a way. I think in baseball it's easier than in this. If you're comparing Pelé in whatever chunk of time you want to look at, let's just say from his World Cup wins, 58 to 70. You want to take that era and compare it to what Messi has done in a 12-year run, what Cristiano Ronaldo's done. They faced more challenges. It's
true.
In some ways, it's harder in soccer to compare because you're comparing not just eras, but you're comparing countries and different leagues to other leagues, and it's far more complicated. But I don't think Pelé faced the same type of challenges that Messi and Ronaldo have in their time.
No, because the competitive, I don't want to necessarily say competitive balance, but just the competition in, say, 58 to 70 is far different than it was for what Messi and Ronaldo were facing.
Yeah, I think so. It's tough. I mean, and this is stuff where there's not a one answer that's right and everybody else is wrong. It's not like that. This is opinion, and that's what the greatest goal tournament is. That's what our greatest win tournament will be. It's opinion, and it's trying to judge it based off how you judge it versus how I judge it versus how somebody else judges it. That's why you put it up to a vote and you see where it goes.
How is the greatest goal tournament right now, by the way? How many upsets are possibly on the board?
Well, there's only 4 matches, so settle down. I mean, there's only 4, and there were only 4 teams that were seeded to begin with. So, when you're getting into upsets, it depends on your judgment of what's an upset and what's not. Let's pull it up and see where the voting is at the moment in the Elite Eight.
I guess I was looking at the overall number 1 seeds from each quadrant is how I was looking at it.
Well, 1 is out. The Joseph goal of the year from last year was voted out, and Tito at Orlando is going to advance into the Final Four over Kratz's second goal against Montreal. It's 84.6% to Tito. Why are you? What was that noise about?
No, just the Kevin Kratz goal for me, knocking off Miggy Hop and advancing out of that quadrant. I just like to see that. That's all.
It's not George Mason advancing in the tournament. It's just a goal. I don't think it's greater than the Tito goal in Orlando.
No, I said,
why are you?
It's George Mason. I was having a George Mason reaction.
But it's not. You're not watching it play a game. That doesn't even make any sense. Anyway, the next one, Joseph at Orlando to break the scoring record, is 77.3% ahead of Joseph versus Philadelphia in the playoffs last year. I expected that one.
Yep, makes sense.
Tito Villalba in the Red Bulls playoff match beats the other goal from the Red Bulls playoff match, Franco Escobar, 63%. And the one that's still a little close, but it looks like it's going to be the Tito Villalba goal at San Jose, which was a seed, advancing over Tito's goal versus Orlando at Bobby Dodd. It's 53.8% to the San Jose goal.
So you have about an hour left, people. Vote. About an hour? All right.
Yeah, about an hour.
Okay. Like I said, I have to get my time frames right so I'm not sending people down the wrong path.
Seriously, you're already trying to put it into a Final Four, and I mean, it's craziness.
I thought we were in the Final Four as of yesterday. I thought voting stopped after yesterday's show.
You're not paying attention because you're not drinking Mountain Dew or something.
True. I'm still down to my one soda a day, and it is stuck to Diet Dr. Pepper and Diet A&W because they taste closest to the actual caffeinated version that isn't diet. So yeah, I'm still on.
Explain that again, because that made zero sense to me.
Okay, so when I'm looking for, as of this recommendation from my doctor's physician's assistant, same roof, different dude, but all under the same umbrella, so I imagine they're sharing the same information. When it was recommended that I cut back on my caloric intake,
I was really just looking for the differences between your Mountain Dews and diet and not diet and kind of diet and somewhat caffeinated, not caffeinated. Okay, go ahead.
Getting there.
Sorry.
All right. So when, the Mountain Dew, I allow the one during the day, and then drinking diet drinks pretty much. So trying to find a drink that is similar in taste to the original, that was where I stumbled into Diet Dr. Pepper, because it tastes as close to the original, and Diet A&W, it tastes as close to the original. So that's what I'm chasing when it comes to diet drinks, because most diet drinks taste bleh. So trying to find stuff that's close.
Okay, but didn't you say something about the caffeine level?
No, caloric intake.
Okay.
No, right. Caffeine, I mean, I really don't know how to gauge levels of caffeine in these drinks, because honestly, around 4:30 in the afternoon, I turn into like yawning guy, and I'm trying to figure out ways to push through that. So, yeah, I don't know how much caffeine these diet drinks have by comparison, but yeah, still stuck to the one Mountain Dew a day, and I'm not a fan.
Okay. Have you had that Mountain Dew yet?
No, actually.
Okay.
I have it next to me. I'm waiting until I finish consuming my first diet drink of the day, and then probably for the second half of the show, that's when I have my Mountain Dew to get me through and push and get over the top, and then the rest of the day it's diet drinks, and I'm not a fan.
I think you're going to need to figure out some way to get some caffeine in you.
Like I said, the sooner that I finish this particular diet drink, then I can go to the Mountain Dew.
No, I'm not talking like this morning in particular. I'm just saying in general, you're going to have to find something else that you can drink that's got caffeine in it, so you're not having these issues.
Taka says that Diet Orange Crush is amazing, no caffeine, but awesome nonetheless.
Well, I mean, okay, that would be good for you to have in general, but you need to find caffeine in a diet beverage or something else like a green tea or matcha or mate or something. And
and I have found Diet Cheerwine, by the way.
That shouldn't even exist. Like, why does that exist?
Ask the Cheerwine folks, but that's actually
like
tastes
having a diet menu at Waffle House. I mean, why?
I know. But if I can reach out and still have something that tastes like the original, I'll take it. So, yeah, had a friend go across state lines and bring it back from North Carolina. Actually,
you have friends smuggling Diet Cheerwine to you?
Check.
I mean, I don't think it really needs to be smuggled. I think it's safe to transport.
Well, I'd love to know where I can buy it here in SDHHQ. I haven't been able to find it.
There's places that have Cheerwine. So
Cheerwine, but not diet though.
Because it's garbage. I mean, there's a reason why people don't carry garbage.
Hey, it still tastes the same, and it still turns your tongue absolutely dark red.
See, I don't know how Cheerwine diet would taste the same, because isn't it pretty much just like pure sugar?
I would hope, for my own personal safety.
So then how would the diet one work?
I don't know. What I'll do in our commercial break, leading into hour number 2, is I'll go and get one, and I can read it and see if I can compare.
Okay. I was about to say, don't mix your Diet Dr. Pepper and Diet Cheerwine.
No. I'm not gonna crack
gross.
one open during the show. It's not this particular show, considering I have a plan already that it is Diet A&W and then Mountain Dew.
Your Diet A&W. Sorry, you have a plan. Yeah. You have a beverage plan.
I have a beverage plan. Start with the diet. Get that in your system, and then go to the caffeine to finish the show, and then we'll kind of, Hey, I told you I wasn't a fan of this entire endeavor, but I'm following the advice of my physician.
Okay.
Chris Hutchison, by the way, says coffee for the win. Chris, I've never been a coffee person on a hashtag Wired Wednesday, according to Chris.
Yeah, well, not wired. It'd be unwired for John. I'm not a coffee person either. I will do it from time to time. Coffee has always upset my stomach. Always.
Never liked the taste.
You can mitigate the taste. I don't love the taste either, but now if I do coffee, I will do iced coffee, and I'll usually do it with milk and caramel, and that. I can do that. That's all right. I'd rather have a Coke Energy or a Red Bull, but, I can do an iced coffee with milk and caramel and be okay. I'm just not a big coffee fan at all. It was kind of funny, though, when we were in Mexico. So Mike and I this was the day of the match, and usually on, a game day, I pretty much, eat plain stuff. I don't want to eat anything that would, upset my stomach or whatever.
Was this Monterey or Club America?
This is Club America. This was recently. So I don't really take any chances on game day. I just keep it pretty basic. And we were also kind of mapping out what the day was going to look like from a timeline perspective, because we knew we were flying back immediately afterwards. We knew that there was probably little chance of grabbing something at the stadium to eat. So it was we wanted to eat a late lunch as late as possible to then, basically sustain us through the rest of the day. So we went over to the mall that was across from the hotel, the Perisur Mall, and we had seen an Italian place. And we're like, okay, cool, pasta would be perfect. That'll be good.
Yes.
So we go in, and they weren't serving lunch yet, because remember the time difference and everything. So we were trying to navigate all of this. They weren't serving lunch yet, and they were serving a brunch. So it's man, okay, we're stuck here, and we couldn't figure out what we were going to do. So we ended up, because they had just had brunch, and it was brunchy kind of stuff, which wasn't what we were looking for at all. But we didn't want to just sit down and then leave, because that's kind of rude. So, we grabbed a beverage, and we also had some fruit. I had some fruit and yogurt that was actually pretty good. The fresh fruit was really, really good. And then we had to go eat lunch at the Cheesecake Factory, because, that was what we had. That was what was available. And it did the trick. They had pasta. It was good pasta. Did the trick.
Yes.
The day before is where we had the adventure, though, where we were a little more adventurous. There was a place that was described as a Spanish lunch spot. It wasn't really Spanish. It was more of just basic Latin food. I had chilaquiles. They were great. But we tried to order when we first got there, and they did not have any English speakers on the staff, at least that we first interacted with. And we were kind of struggling to find common footing here. But we were trying to order sparkling water. And what's the brand? I'm drawing a blank. Topo Chico, I think. We were trying to order that, and I think we mumbled it a little bit too much, because we ended up with cappuccinos. It's okay, this is not what we ordered at all. But again, you want to be nice, because it's our screw up. And had it, and it was amazing. It was such a good cappuccino, which I've never been a fan of. It had like this giant thick layer of the top on the cappuccino above the coffee. That was really good. It was perfect. And I would have never ordered it on my own. So we got lucky trying to order sparkling water and ended up with a cappuccino. And it was the perfect spot. It was good.
Okay.
So now I want cappuccino, but we're in a lockdown and stuff, and I can't find that cappuccino anywhere. So
little help for the guy. Needs some cappuccino.
no, I'm not going to find cappuccino right now because I'm not able to go and talk to a barista for a long period of time or any of that. I'm just going to sit here and wait. I'll have cappuccino later when we're out of quarantining ourselves. Then I'll have some cappuccino somewhere because now I've developed a taste for it.
There you go. You want questions from the timeline?
Sure.
Antonio this morning. Good morning, gents.
Yo.
Good morning, Antonio. I've seen jokes about the subject, but any thoughts on who Castro's 6-month loan would work out? I'm guessing how and not who. Any thoughts on how Castro's 6-month loan would work out considering the pause in the season? Hashtag I miss Franco False 9.
Well, I mean, it's a 6-month loan. It doesn't change. So you got to make a decision by the time the loan ends up or he goes back to Estudiantes. That's really difficult because you haven't had a chance to really see much. So, and there's, who knows? You might get a chance to see a little bit more. You might not. That's what's difficult about all this. But this is what we were talking about yesterday and what kept coming up yesterday as more things were written and more reports were coming out. It was, you've got contracts that are ending June 30th in a lot of leagues around the world, and that's difficult. But the more complicated ones are situations like this. It's a loan that ends, either at the end of a European season, which was supposed to be June 30th, or something like this where it's halfway through the MLS season, but at the end of what was supposed to be the Argentine season. And even more complicated, you've got situations like Ziyech from Ajax, who has signed a pre-contract with Chelsea that's supposed to start July 1st.
Yep.
So is that going to happen? This is where, as things currently stand, yeah, that's going to happen. Castro's loan ends June 30th. You have to make a decision on extending it. Anybody else who has a bunch of players on loan, like Newcastle, for example, has, I think, 9 guys that are on loan or their contract ends on June 30th. You're going to have to figure these things out unless... And it's going to take FIFA at the top to extend or give the option to extend certain periods of time. But even that creates a bunch of issues because you've got clubs that have players that are loaned out that are expecting them back to be able to potentially sell them because they got to sell players to balance the books. You got clubs who the time that they balance their books is in the transfer window. And they might have players that they need back. Estudiantes could be looking at this as, well, if Atlanta's not going to extend the loan or keep him, we want to get him back because we want to sell him to somebody else. And that's what's so hard about all of this. But as things currently stand, when the loan is up, the loan is up. Unless something is ratified as a change, and I think it would honestly have to come from the top with FIFA to basically put a hold on everything. And that would probably only be a temporary thing until we get some kind of resumption of activity. Until that, right now, Atlanta United's got to make a decision on extending Castro's loan further because it's up on June 30th.
Along those same lines, Ricky Ricardo's in this morning, and he asks, do we have any idea how soccer transfer windows will work this year? I know a lot of talk in the Atlanta United universe was about PT and Barco, and if the summer window could see one or both of them get sold, how much impact do you think this will have?
Well, right now, we know nothing. Right now, we just know when the calendar's set as it currently stands. We don't know if there will be changes. There's a lot of dominoes that are going to fall and affect this. If you're looking at the European leagues and how they go, because they're going to drive a lot of this, although don't discount the effect the South American leagues will have on it as well. You've got I think first you have to figure out what you're going to do about the current season. Are you going to finish it no matter what? Are you going to set a drop-dead date and say, nope, the season is over at this date no matter what? Or are you going to find some in between? I don't know. I think that's the number one thing that has to get sorted out. Domestic leagues and what the deal is with the current season. Then you can figure out what the deal is with the next season. Then you can figure out the gap in between, which is where you'd like to have a transfer window. And then once you have those things, you can also figure out things like the Champions League, Europa League, in South America, Copa Libertadores, although it continues the whole year. So you've got a little more flexibility there in dealing with things. But you can start to figure out all those things. You have to start, and this is what's hard because every country is going to be different, you have to start with what happens with the current season. Because it's going to affect everything else. If you just let some leagues say we're going to finish it, and you let other leagues say no, it's done now, we're declaring it null and void, then you're going to have even more issues because things won't line up. So I don't know. I think, you've got countries meeting, you've got continents meeting with UEFA and others meeting. You're going to have, even though FIFA doesn't like to be in this situation, they're going to have to give some guidance and some direction on the overall big picture of this, especially where it relates to the transfer windows, because that's the part that is in the FIFA jurisdiction. So you're going to have them be involved in setting some of that, or at least trying to create some kind of consistency in it. Until then, we have no idea. I mean, right now we know that the MLS transfer window is open for a little over a month, and then it is currently scheduled to be open again in July, like everybody. And we'll see what happens. In terms of any kind of prediction about Ezequiel Barco, Pity Martinez, any other players, it's way too early to even have, I think, an educated guess on it. Because, Atlanta United is in a position where do they have to sell players to balance the books? No. There will be clubs who are going to be in that boat. I don't think MLS clubs will be in that boat, but there are going to be clubs around the world that are going to, the quickest way they can bring in revenue is going to be selling players. And you're going to be looking at that. So that's going to change the market. You're going to have players available who maybe would not have been available previously. Clubs who are in good financial positions are going to be having an opportunity to add players to their roster that maybe they didn't consider that would have been available before. That's definitely going to happen. In terms of these guys, and they're, we know Barco wants to be in Europe. He's never been there. We know Pity wants to get to Europe. He's never been there. They're very different players in terms of the age and the price and all the things that can factor into it. But I think it's just way too early because we don't even know what the timeline's going to be yet, because I do not see the European transfer window being in the same spot that it is, because I don't think the domestic leagues will be completed by then. FIFA's going to have the ability to move those windows around. You're going to have to. Otherwise, you create a situation where let's play the hypothetical game. Let's look at England, for example, and just that move that's already done with Ziyech for going from Ajax to Chelsea. Is he going to join Chelsea for the end of the current season? Because I don't think the Premier League's done by July 1st.
Nope.
Is he going to leave Ajax before their current season is over? I mean, he's got a contract, so he's even more complicated to do that. Let's talk about if the window stays the same, and you've got La Liga, which is close. Let's say, Real Madrid, the window opens, they've got 4 games left. They go throw a bunch of money at a club to bring in a player because they've got the money to do it, and that club has to sell the player, and they change the trajectory of this season because of a bonus transfer window. Is that what everybody wants? I don't think so. And FIFA is going to have to be involved in that side of it. So It's all super complicated. And until we know what leagues are going to do with the current season, it's hard to guess anything further.
Separate news this morning out of England, and it's morning our time. The PFA is meeting with both Premier League and EFL officials to discuss player wages and whether they can agree on a deferral of salaries. And it's a suggestion of a collective agreement to cover all players from the Premier League all the way down to League Two. But the larger issue is obviously the varying levels of all of the salaries that are involved. So
one reason that's coming up is you've got DAZN, who is a sports streaming service. It doesn't have any major U.S. league properties, but has properties with a lot of leagues around the world. DAZN has come out and said they're not paying their rights fees right now.
Right.
So their next payments that are supposed to go out, they're not going out. It goes back to what we talked about with Bayern yesterday and what Karl-Heinz Rummenigge said. You know, they've got to figure out how to deal with upcoming payments that are supposed to be delivered this month from Sky in Germany. You know, if Sky comes back and says, well, we're not getting any games, so why are we going to give you money right now? We'll give you the money when the games continue. You're going to have clubs that aren't going to be able to pay players. So it's complicated. Like, I think a lot of people are oversimplifying it when you see something like, you know, a club have to furlough people or players say, you know, we'll defer payments and all that. It's like, yeah, players should do that. No, clubs shouldn't do that. Clubs might not have the money to pay people because they're not getting the money in from places that they should be getting the money in from. And not even gate revenue, TV money that they're expecting, that they've budgeted, that they have counted on. In addition to the gate revenue, they might not have that. And then when you extend it to the next level and you're talking about the transfer window, you've got clubs that go in that created their budget for this season and looked at it and knew that they'd be at this point in the year and knew that they would have to sell 3 players, 5 players, and try to bring in $30 million, $40 million. To balance the books at the end of the season, going into the next season. And now they don't know when they can do that. So it's not simple. None of this is simple. None of this is easy. And I think when you talk about all of it, you have to look at it through that big picture view of, you know, if TV companies don't pay their rights fees that clubs have budgeted, clubs are going to struggle to operate, period, because none of the other revenue is coming in, and it's going to be rough. And that's why you're having these conversations like you are in England now, because some clubs are going to have to come up with a solution about deferring payments or what have you. I don't know what I don't think there is a right answer. Let's put it that way. I don't think there is one way to handle this and everybody's going to be good. How clubs navigate it, it's going to be very important because it will set the table for what's to come when we do start to get back to normal. Because you're going to have some clubs that financial position has dramatically changed. You're going to have some who are in a precarious situation who this could put them under. You're going to have a lot of situations that we have never seen before. And that's what's coming. And how these decisions get made now will affect what is to come.
Let's see, Newcastle, Norwich, and Tottenham. We mentioned Tottenham yesterday. They've announced that non-playing staff have been furloughed. FIFPro, the Sky is referring to it as the world's leading players union, FIFPro, says it is, quote, extremely concerned, end quote, that clubs in several countries have begun to immediately lay off players or unilaterally reduce their salaries because of what's going on with COVID-19. Many players worldwide, according to FIFPro, earn at or below average domestic income and would be severely affected by salary decreases. And you mentioned TV money and its impact. The example that I keep going back to is Bournemouth in the Premier League, where 85% of the money that comes in from TV revenue goes toward player salary.
But the thing about Bournemouth, we don't know. We haven't heard anything about any delay in money coming in. So no. I want to make that clear. Like, yes, it's a huge chunk of it, but we don't know if that's being affected yet. We've not heard anything specifically about, payments being deferred from TV money to English clubs. I want to make that really clear, because Germany, that's a conversation that's being had right now. They're about to talk to Sky and say, well, what are we going to do? Are you going to pay us? Or are you not going to pay us? I don't know what the contract is in Germany. I don't know what the contract is in Spain or Italy or anywhere else. So that has to be made clear right now, because they could be in a very different situation than a German club who, and this is where FIFPro, I understand it. This is what they do. They represent all the players worldwide. Everybody's in a different situation, but German clubs might not have a choice. Not the major clubs, but even Bayern's talked about how they're going to take a hit here. You take a lesser club that is operating on a thin margin to begin with, and they don't have the home games that they should have had up to now, so you haven't banked any money. And your big check that you were expecting from your TV partner doesn't come in April? Do you have the money to pay people? You might not. And that's the conversation you're going to start to get to with some of these clubs. Now, I think when FIFPro brings up what they did about players making less than the average domestic salary in countries, we're not talking about first division players in major leagues. We're talking about different players, but we're also talking about those players at clubs that are probably very small to begin with. And just like here in the U.S., we've seen small restaurants, small businesses close down, have to lay people off. It's the same conversation. The fact remains that if you don't have revenue, you can't pay people. And some clubs don't have a stash of money to work from. So that's just a fact. And it sucks, and it's awful, and you hate it, and it's never where you want to be with any of this. It's the reality that some clubs are going through. And that's what's going to make all of this very complicated. And I hope that people are thinking big picture here with a lot of this in the long term, because you're going to have things look very different when we're done, even if things are handled right. Soccer's going to look very different. MLS, I don't think, is going to be affected in the same way that other leagues are, but you have the potential where we had talked about before, just based off numbers and projections and revenues and costs going out before this. You had the worry that some clubs that got relegated would have problems surviving. You've got second and third and fourth division clubs that are going out of business. Well, now, because of this, you're going to have first division clubs that are not going to be able to operate normally. It's going to happen in major leagues. It's going to happen. And that's not something that is obviously good for the game for big clubs, because that's not even getting into the smaller clubs lower down. They're going to have even bigger problems. It's not good to have this situation across the board. And football as a whole, FIFA on down, is going to have to figure out a way to work together. Players, clubs, administrators, federations, all of it, to limit the damage. You're not going to be able to avoid it, but you're going to have to work together to limit it. If people don't work together doing this, if the players don't work together with the clubs, people are going to go out of business, and those players aren't going to have a place to play. They're going to have to go find another club. They're going to have to work with the clubs, and that's why we're seeing some of it. You're going to have the clubs work with the federations. The leagues are going to have to work with the clubs. You're going to have to figure out ways to survive all of this. And if they don't want to work together and they want to argue about all of it, then you're going to have some big issues. Let's take a quick break, reset for hour number 2. We're going to get Mike Conti on after this, and we're going to try to come up with our seeds for the Greatest Atlanta United Win bracket. That's the next bracket challenge we'll have, probably starting over the weekend. So we'll see if we can get that done in about 20 minutes. We'll be right back after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service Ad Council and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Welcome back. Hour number 2, Soccer Down Here, April 1st. No April Fool's jokes on this show. Not happening. No, it's not the time for that kind of nonsense, is it, Mike?
It never is. April 1st is one of the most overrated, days on the calendar. Right up there with, Flag Day and these other made-up holidays that we have. I don't have time for April Fool's jokes when I'm busy, and I'm not busy right now, so I definitely don't have time for April Fool's jokes that could give me, a false sense of hope or something like that. So let's just all keep it moving and reduce the nonsense today, shall we?
Yes. I'm with that.
Hashtag reduce the nonsense.
Well, we can't commit to that because we're about to debate the seeds for the upcoming Greatest Atlanta United Win tournament. So nonsense is about to occur.
Is it going to be a field of 64?
Now, you said 64 win. Is that just MLS play or is that all competitions?
No, if you go all competitions, God, I had the numbers off the top of my head yesterday. I think it's 58 all-time MLS wins, I want to say.
Okay.
And then obviously you have Campeones Cup. You have 7 U.S. Open Cup wins. You have 2 CONCACAF Champions League wins off the top of my head, I think. I guess you could count Carolina Challenge Cup wins, but we'll just leave that out.
Not official.
So we'll leave that out. So, if you count CONCACAF, U.S. Open Cup, Campeones Cup, and Major League Soccer, you're actually going to be eliminating wins to get to a 64-win bracket.
And is that including playoffs, too? In your 58 for MLS?
I don't. Well, boy. Whew, okay, 21 in 2018.
Okay.
Not including playoffs.
Okay, you didn't have... Okay, yeah.
17 in 2017.
38.
So what? That's 30... Is it 38 or 48?
21 and 17, 38.
38. Okay. What do you have last year? 18? I think, in the regular season?
I gotta look at it.
56.
So, yeah, that takes us to 56. You had 2 playoff wins last year. It takes you to 58. You had... How many playoff... Yeah,
4.
4 playoff wins in 2017. So, yeah, if you want to include the playoff wins, now you're up to like 70 wins across all competitions. It's going to be really, really tough for a U.S. Open Cup win over Charleston Battery to kind of make the cut.
The empty game.
Yeah, well, or the blowout they had playing with the second choice team in 2018 at Kennesaw. So, I mean, some of those might be kind of fringy, but you could actually, you really could have a lot of fun with this. But you've got to seed it because, and this is going to be a project. I mean, this is going to take a while. But the last thing you want is a first round matchup between winning the MLS Cup final and the 2-1 win over Orlando in 2018 where Joseph broke the record. Like, you can't have that in the first round. It's got to be the MLS Cup final against the U.S. Open Cup win over FC St. Louis, Right. But seeding, first of all, selecting the 64 wins and then seeding them, I mean, that could be a... I mean, it's a good thing we all have a lot of time.
I was about to say, we got time.
That could be a time-consuming process.
All right, let's try to figure out the seeds, at least the top seeds, and we'll work through. There might be a play-in, or the selection committee might leave out a win against Charleston in the Open Cup or something.
Okay.
So
well, three right off the bat, right? Like I think 3 of the 4 regions are pretty solid, right? The MLS Cup win over Portland.
Yep.
The U.S. Open Cup win over Minnesota, and I'll put the Campiones Cup win over Club America. I think that should be a number 1 seed.
Agreed. All right, so we agree on 3 of the 4 on my page.
Okay.
And then
that's
the fourth one. I think the fourth one, you could make an argument for the Leg 1 conference final win over Red Bulls, just because I think, and this is something that Jason and I go round and round on all the time. I really think that was the night where we kind of knew that Atlanta United was going to win it all. That was such a major score line to basically make the second leg up at Red Bull Arena pretty much stress-free, and we knew that if Atlanta United won the conference final, they'd be able to host the MLS Cup, and we knew they weren't going to lose the MLS Cup at the Benz, right? So that would be my submission for the 4th number 1 seed.
Okay.
What about you, John? What are you thinking?
5 Stripes After Dark, San Jose.
Okay.
Okay.
Because this is where we get into, how you define it. Is it meaningful? Is it just a great win? Is it, a crazy game? Was there a special moment? This is where it can get interesting.
Let's interject the criteria that Kevin Egan has been using. And I think this is how this all came up on Twitter yesterday, because someone had tweeted at us reminding us that yesterday was 2 years to the day of the win at Minnesota.
Yep.
And Kevin, at that time, proclaimed it to be the greatest win in Atlanta United history. And we had a lot of fun with Kevin over that one.
Hey, I agreed. At the time, I agreed.
And obviously, I mean, they've won some very significant matches since then.
Yeah.
But, I think Kevin's reasoning is actually kind of solid.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's something that you agree with, that Atlanta United had to draw upon that experience that they had at Minnesota many times throughout the course of that 2018 season, all the way through the playoffs to the Cup final. And the fact that they proved to themselves that they could win a match ugly in a manner completely contrary to the way that Tata Martino had set that team up to win, that is absolutely a very significant win.
Yep.
And then when you put on top of it the conditions, the sub-zero wind chills, I mean, the fact that you had, I looked it up, I mean, the stats are hilarious, actually. Atlanta United had 60 clearances. Minnesota had 48 crosses in that match. And about 10 of those crosses were out of bounds. They only turned 3 of those crosses into a shot on target. But still, I mean, so this kind of goes to what John is talking about with San Jose. It is absolutely a very memorable win, and it added a tool to the tool chest for Atlanta United that they needed to pull out of the box later in that 2018 season. So if you want to go 2018 San Jose, or if you want to go 2018 Minnesota, I can't really argue against it. To me, those feel more like number 3 seeds, especially the Minnesota match, because it was so early in the season and there wasn't really much consequence tied to the outcome. I think consequence tied to outcome is a major, major factor in all of this, which is why I put more weight on knockout playoff games or leg play or one-off trophy games or cup games. I think consequence really, really is an important factor in that too. You know, a match played in March in MLS, or even a match played in September in MLS, does not carry the same kind of consequence as a knockout game, in my opinion. But I think that's kind of the fun, subjective nature about putting a bracket together. Where, okay, like I'm having fun with these U.S. Open Cup games, but you know, the match against St. Louis, I think, was what, a Cup quarterfinal.
Yep.
The
win in Orlando, the semifinal win in Orlando without Joseph, is one that I'm
top 4 seed.
Yeah,
yes.
I think it's a top 4 seed.
Yeah, but even like the St. Louis match, okay, that's a U.S. Open Cup quarterfinal. You lose that, you're out. You know, the win that they had in Philadelphia a couple days after the 4th of July in 2018, where you know, they were coming off that you know, ugly kind of blow-it loss in Dallas. That's a big win that started a big winning streak, but it was also a match in July. So you could make the argument that beating a USL team in a U.S. Open Cup quarterfinal is actually bigger than beating a very good MLS team in their park at a point in the season where you're looking for a win.
Yeah, it's going to be funny how this gets broken out, because I think we have some ideas about the top, the 1 seeds, the 2 seeds, maybe down to the 3s, maybe even a few than the 4s.
I think you could seed the top 16. You know, the top 4 seed, and then it's random draw for everything else. I really think you could do that.
That's what I'm thinking.
And again, I mean, if you're going top 16, you've got your 3 trophies. You throw in your 5 playoff wins, that gets you to 9. You could throw in your additional, well, I'm sorry, it gets you to 8 because you can't, or 7, you can't count the Red Bulls playoff win and the MLS Cup twice. You know, you could add in your 4 Open Cup wins from 2018. Or 2019, excuse me. You could add in, you know, your CONCACAF wins over Herediano and over Motagua, maybe Monterrey. Like, and then you're right, Jason. Like, there were some very, very big late season wins. You know, even in 2017 and 2019, to solidify your seed and your spot in the playoff, like, you could add those in too, because those are wins with consequence. And then
there's ones with moments, like the first win at Mercedes-Benz. You know, that's going to be one that I think will get by a round or two. The 7-0 Revolution game in 17, that's one because it's nuts.
Absolutely.
The win in Orlando in 17 with the Villalba goal, that's one that's going to make some hay in the tournament.
And the win in Orlando in 18 when Joseph broke the record. You know, boy, I mean, you could really go through this here. I mean, and I think road wins probably get maybe a slight boost because they did occur on the road. I think your 1-0 win at Yankee Stadium in the 2018 playoffs is a massive win that's going to need to be considered. Your win at Galaxy in 2018 was Zlatan is something that's going to have to be under consideration for a seed. We're going to play that match broadcast Saturday at 5 o'clock on 90.
Excellent plug. Nicely done.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't envy you for having to seed all this and to kind of pick out what's more unique than less unique. But what a great problem to have, a club that's been in existence for a little more than 3 years. And we're talking about, we've got more than 64 wins to choose from to create a 64 match bracket. I mean, it's crazy. Has Orlando won 64 matches across all competitions in their history? Probably. But
I know. I don't know if they have, actually. I don't know if they have. Hold on. This has got to get looked at now.
Well, because Orlando's never been in CONCACAF, okay?
Nope. Never been a postseason.
I don't think they've played in a Leagues Cup or any other kind of, one-off trophy competitions. They do have a couple U.S. Open Cup victories.
So in league play, and we'll have to look at the rest in a second. So you have no playoff wins. In league play, you've got 12 from the first year, 9 from the second. That gets you to 21.
21. Yeah.
31 with 10 wins in 17. 39 with 8 wins in 18.
Oh, brother. They're not going to make it.
In 48 in 19.
It's
with
not
9
even close.
Wins. No, they're 48.
So they're an NCAA tournament from the mid-1980s.
Well, you had some Open Cup wins. We'll give them the Open Cup wins. They did get to a semifinal. So they don't get to 64, though.
No.
In 5 years. Did they win? Did it start this season? Did they have a win in 2020? They might.
Didn't they play RSL to a draw?
Yeah.
I don't remember their other match. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up.
I think they had 2 draws. Let me double check.
Nope,
one draw,
matter.
one loss.
Yeah, they ain't getting a full bracket.
They don't
They're
get a
still
full
not
bracket.
getting
Sorry,
to 64.
Orlando.
That's hilarious. Yeah, so they're in like the 1982 NCAA tournament.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, and for me, though, Mike, you're talking about consequence tied to outcome, and you're looking at the Minnesota match. I mean, for me, I pulled extrapolating any kind of a future result and a consequence away from the equation.
Okay.
So because you can sit there and say, this win proved that they could do X, Y, or Z in a certain situation, I just took the win at face value for what it was, and that was why I had Five Stripes After Dark in San Jose, considering the present tense of that match, all of the consequence that happened, all the events that happened, and lumped it all into one pile and took everything away from it.
Yeah, and there was consequence to that match. I mean, don't get me wrong. If they had lost that, the Supporters' Shield would have been a very, very, very remote possibility going into the last week of the season. So I'm not saying there wasn't consequence attached to that. Those turned out to be 3 very, very critical points to give Atlanta United the chance to win the Supporters' Shield on the final day of the season. We know they couldn't convert, but I don't want to demean that loss either, or that win either, because there was something attached to it. You're completely right.
So the other ones that have jumped out to me from 2019, the win at home against NYC and the win on the road in Portland are the standouts outside of the playoff wins. Those are the 2 standout wins outside of Campeones Cup or Open Cup or anything else. Like regular season, those are the 2 for me.
Yeah. The win at SKC, I thought they played really, really well. But again, early season against an extremely injured opponent.
Yep.
Boy, oh boy. I mean, to be honest with you, what stands out the most to me in 2019 is how well they played in some of their losses. Or some of the draws that they had where they played. Like, they had a really entertaining draw against Red Bulls right after the Women's World Cup final. That was a great game, but it wasn't a win.
I hope we don't get to do a bracket of best draws in Atlanta. I'm hoping we don't.
Best non-wins.
No, if we get that far, we're going to have bigger problems in this country than just doing a best draw bracket.
Yeah.
But their performance at LAFC was really, really good. But it's not a win. I don't know though, Jason. I mean, they played really well against Galaxy. They got a big home win against DC United. There were good wins in the 2019 season that are worthy of consideration. They finally beat Toronto in May. Their win over Minnesota, not the Open Cup, the regular season win in May. Great win. Dominant performance against Houston when we were really, really nervous midweek after the Seattle match. What's going to happen? And fortunately, a very early red card came into play. But Atlanta United was excellent that night. So you're going to have some wins from 2019 that are going to go into the seeding discussion. If I were to seed one win over the others, it would probably be that win over New York City. I agree with you, because that was, oh boy, that was probably the highest quality opponent they beat in the regular season in 2019. Galaxy did not have Zlatan playing. DC was good, but I think New York City was better. I mean, New York City ended up the number 1 seed in the East.
Yeah.
You did not beat Philadelphia last year. You did not beat LAFC. You did not beat Real Salt Lake. Like, just going through all the teams that made the playoffs. You did get some wins over New England. And New England turned out to make the playoff. But I think as far as quality of opponent defeated and quality of performance, yes, that win over New York City, which could have had an even gaudier scoreline if they had correctly given Pitti that penalty right at the end.
Yep.
That's a seedable win from 2019.
Yeah, that's the one that I think might make the top 4 seeds, in top 16 overall, as a 4 seed potentially. So I think we're all in agreement. The 3 easy seeds are 2018 MLS Cup, U.S. Open Cup win over Minnesota, final Campeones Cup win over Club America. I think those are number ones with a bullet.
Yeah.
Yeah, no question.
And
no question.
I'm leaning to yours, Mike, of 2018 against Red Bulls in the home leg as the 4th number 1 seed. I'm trying to find an argument for something else.
Yeah,
better.
I just don't know. I don't know what else qualifies because, again, you have to look at quality of opponent, consequence, quality of performance. That might have been the best match they played all of 2018. I mean, Red Bulls tactically played into their hands, but, I mean, they played a great match that day. Great match.
Let me throw another 2018 match out just to get an opinion here on a seed.
Okay.
What about the 5-0 win over LAFC?
Seedable, absolutely. In fact, that was one we almost replayed on 92.9 The Game. We talked about that. A lot of people forget Mikey Ambrose and Miles Robinson both started in that match. And I want to say, did Andrew Carlton play significantly in that match? There was some rotation that day. Nationally televised game. And you're right, it was a rout. It was a romp. And I think we learned more about LAFC than we learned about Atlanta United that day. But, 1,000% in the discussion for something that you could see. That was a really, really good performance. Again, very early in the season. Very, very early. So the consequence factor was rather low.
Yeah, I think others that I've got under consideration for seeds, and we'll go by year, the 2017 games that stand out to me, the win in Orlando, the win in Minnesota because it's the first ever win,
right.
The win against Dallas to open Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and the Rev Wedding 7-0 over the Revolution. 2018 regular season stuff, the LAFC game, the win in Minnesota, the win in San Jose, playoff wins, both of them over New York City, the 2018 regular season win at Philadelphia, the 2018, and this is one from me, the 2018 win at home regular season against RSL after the road trip.
Great performance.
Dominated the match.
Yeah.
That's a big one for me. I think that's in the conversation. And then, go ahead.
Yeah, I would also just add the home win against Columbus, I think, is one that gets forgotten because it was in the midst of Joseph chasing the record. But they had to kind of hang on a little bit. Very, very gritty effort on a Sunday afternoon. The win at Galaxy, as we talked about, from 2018. The win at Montreal in 2018 was a really good performance. Misleading scoreline. Montreal got a goal late against the run of play. That was a 2-1 win that felt like it was a 3-0 win. And he had a weather delay in that, too.
That's right.
The win at Columbus in June of that year, the 2-0 win. Dominant performance with Joseph, I think, breaking his nose in that match. Or playing with the face shield, and I don't remember. I don't know if he got hurt.
He broke it in that one.
Before. Yeah. So, I mean, that one would have to be considered as well. There's a lot from 2018 that could be seeded.
Yeah, 2018, there's a bunch. 2019, at Sporting versus New York City, at Portland, the playoff wins against New England, against Philadelphia, the Open Cup wins against St. Louis, and then at Orlando.
Yeah. At Orlando's a solid 3 or 4 seasons.
Yeah, that one's going to be high on my list.
Yeah. Because remember, no Joseph.
Yeah.
You didn't have Joseph. That was the biggest match in Orlando City's history. And Atlanta United did what they always do. They fathered them.
That's what they do. All right, Mike, you've got business to attend to. You've got a conference
Yeah,
call
got
to hop on.
an NFL draft conference call, but we're going to do a stoppage time, 2 p.m. on the 92.9 The Game Facebook page. And I think we know how to, do the microphone this time, so we should be in much better shape.
Yes, I think so. I think we'll be okay.
All right.
Be talking to you then, Mike.
See you guys.
Thanks. All right. We're going to take a quick break while we try to get John back on the line because, it's technology. It's John. Things fall apart. So we'll be right back after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here, April 1st. We've found John, rescued him from technology purgatory, but we've got some announcements to talk about first. UEFA has announced that Champions League, Europa League, postponed until further notice. National team matches that were set for June, canceled. Women's youth national team competitions, the under-19 finals scheduled for July 2020, canceled. The women's U17 finals scheduled for May 2020, postponed until further notice. The reason why it's postponed is it's a qualifying competition for the U17 World Cup. The U19s is not, so the U19s canceled, U17s postponed. The deadlines related to all 2020-2021 UEFA club competitions are postponed until further notice, in particular as regards the admission process and the registration of players. So, that is a big announcement out of UEFA this morning, and we will see how all of this goes. Nobody knows at this point. I mean, that's just basically where we're at. But the important part of this, I think everybody zeroed in on Champions League and Europa League. The important part is everything about 2020, 2021, the next season, is postponed. So those dates that we were talking about, like July 1st, when the new seasonal year starts, contracts, all that. Now, the contract situation is different. That's going to have to get sorted out. But in terms of national leagues, national federations having to declare who is qualified for Champions League, who is qualified for Europa League, that's postponed. All of that is postponed. So that buys countries more time. That creates more time in the calendar. Now, what does it ultimately end up do? We don't know yet. But that was a big thing that had to happen to open up some space. And now we'll see where it goes.
Yep. So big news out of UEFA this morning, and now we get to see where the individual leagues and federations are when it comes to player contracts and that next stage of this whole process.
Sky Sports has posted an article this morning looking at what we were talking about with the transfer window, and it's going to get really interesting because everything is changed dramatically in terms of the market. You're going to have clubs that are going to have to sell. You're going to have clubs that are in good financial positions that are going to be able to buy whatever they want. I do think, and this is what agents are thinking and preparing for, money is not going to be where it was before. So you're going to see lower transfer fees. You're going to see lower salaries. That's a reality that's about to start here. So deals will get done, but are they at the same levels as they were before? No, I don't think so. I think it's going to be very interesting to see who is selling and who is buying.
Yes.
Because you're going to have some that are going to have to sell, and you're going to have some that you're going to have opportunities that maybe they didn't plan for that they're going to really want to buy. So I don't know, but it's all starting to line up a bit where these conversations are starting to be had, and clubs are starting to prepare, agents are starting to prepare, but it's all somewhat starting to line up. At least we know now that leagues are not bound to this idea of having to declare their Champions League qualifiers, their Europa League qualifiers at the beginning of July. So we'll see what happens next.
You mentioned what's going on with UEFA, and we talked about Bournemouth in hour number one. A lot of key personnel up top, club's chief executive, first team technical director, manager Eddie Howe, assistant manager, have all taken significant voluntary pay cuts for the entirety of this uncertain time, quoting from the release from the club. And they've also advised a number of staff across all areas that they will be temporarily furloughed as a result of the ongoing pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the reality of cash flow. And you've got some that are not going to have the cash flow to work with. And decisions are going to have to get made. I mean, that's just the reality that a lot of businesses are going through, period. Soccer's no exception.
And so that was an update on a couple of different fronts. We have folks who have commented on stuff from hour number one and from the discussion that we had about greatest match.
All right, let's hear it.
All right, Nathan Pugh is in this morning. He says, since it's been a while, up the Reds, that is all. And he has watched the English game, wanted to know if we had seen it or talked about it as well. He says it kind of goes well with a lot of what we talked about on tactics evolving yesterday.
No, I haven't gotten into that one yet. I'm going to have to, we'll see, plump for Netflix, because that's one that I have not done. I did other streaming services instead. I did Hulu instead. And man, Netflix keeps dropping stuff that it's like, okay, I want to see this on Netflix. So we will see. But no, I haven't jumped into that yet.
And along those same lines, Joe Johnstone this morning, would you want to tackle this question on the show? With the premiere of Sunderland Till I Die Season 2, how do you think Atlanta United supporters would react if we had a similar losing scenario happen to us? I know we can't be relegated, but would you see a drastic loss of support from the community if we had a few losing seasons, since we're still a bit of a novelty to some?
I think there's always this fear. It's something American soccer is going to have to stop doing. Like, American soccer has this long-term issue with, getting concerned anytime there's a drop in attendance or anytime there's an empty seat or anytime any of that happens. Go watch a lot of big clubs around the world. There's empty seats. It happens. When the team is not performing well, people are not going to come. That's just that's the reality of life. You know, if a movie's bad, you're not going to go pay to watch it. If, you know, the team that you love is not playing well, you're going to have some empty seats. It'll happen. I think it's all about the base that you create. And I think in MLS, Atlanta is better off than anybody else in terms of the size of the base. And I do think the engagement of the fan base. So I think they would weather it better than most, but it does have an effect. And when it goes on for a long, extended period of time, it has a longer effect. Those things are just reality of sports. And it's not something. I think the problem that happens, and I'm not saying that Joe's doing this, I'm saying that this is something that always comes up. It's like, oh, see, yeah, they didn't sell this game out. See, it's all downhill from here. No, it's just maybe they played really bad. They've been on a bad run, and people didn't show up. That happens. You know, it's nothing to overreact about. The overall long term is what you're looking at of it. And we've talked about Houston a lot, and I think Houston is a pretty good example of this. So when the Dynamo first launched, they got a great team day one, and they were playing at Robertson Stadium, and they went to, you know, back-to-back MLS Cups and won it. Then they went to two more in 2011 and 12 and didn't win those. But after that, the decline started, and it kept going down and down and down and down and down, and then they hired Owen Coyle, and it went further down. And you know, you had a little bit of success under Wilmer Cabrera. You got to a Western Conference final, you won an Open Cup, but you had went so far down that it was going to take a lot to climb out. What are the things that can help you climb out? A big name player, we've talked about that, but also sustained success. People will start to come back, and you have to work towards that. You know, in terms of Atlanta United, they would be like any other club in the world if they go through a run of poor results. And I'm not talking like losing a couple in a row. I'm talking like you don't make the playoffs for a year. You don't make the playoffs for 2 years. Would they have a decline? Yeah. You've seen it with the Falcons. You've seen it with the Braves. You've seen it with the Hawks. You see it with any team in the world. There are very few exceptions to where results do not matter to a fan base. And I think a lot of those that people point to are in the past and don't even really apply anymore because it's a different time and discretionary spending is different, prices are different, all of it's different. I don't think the old school way of saying, well, Cubs fans went to see bad baseball for so long at Wrigley Field. Would they now? Have you seen empty seats at Wrigley Field? I have. It happens. Yeah. Fenway Park, same thing. You know, if the Patriots go through a run here where they don't make the playoffs for a while, you're going to see empty seats. The Cowboys, I mean, the Cowboys' attendance would be one that you would look at. Like, do they have some empty seats? Yeah, I mean, they have a gigantic stadium, one-off. But their fan base has held up in recent times with not so great results. They're one. There's a few that you have tradition and things that factor in. But in general, any team in the world in any sport, when there's a bad run of results, or you know, a couple of seasons where you don't make the playoffs or you're not challenging for titles, attendance is going to drop off. Does that mean people disengage with the team? That's the question, because that's where it becomes a different conversation. You know, if you are making the decision, and I've made this decision about going to see the Falcons, for example. You know, if I'm like, man, I don't want to go buy a ticket to watch this team right now. They're not playing well. And I don't have the money to spend on a bad game. Am I still going to watch? Am I still going to keep up with what's going on? Am I still going to care? That's the next level conversation. And in the soccer world in the U.S., it is a little bit of a different conversation, because if you're not that ride or die fan, but you're a soccer fan, and your team, your local team, is playing really bad, well, it's very easy to watch Barcelona or Manchester City or Liverpool or whoever. and get your soccer enjoyment in a different way. That's where it gets a little more complicated. But I think in general, yes, it would be like any other fan base. You would see a little bit of a drop-off. Would it be a long-term drop-off? Depends on how long-term the losing would be. And the longer it goes, the more of a drop-off you would have, and then the harder to win people back it would be without making that big splash kind of move. And again, that's a pretty standard way of doing things. I mean, how many times have we seen a team in any sport who is losing, who is trying to get their fan base back, make a big signing, make a big trade, make a big hire to try to change that conversation? It's a standard move. It's typical.
And in this day and age, you're looking at disposable income. And folks will sit there and they'll look at the price of a ticket. And when you have the self-perception that, no, I'm not going to spend this amount of money for X amount of people to go see an event, but you can do it at home. That's something that we're also seeing these days, is that folks are still engaged, but they're not doing it outside of their own homes. And so that's another part of this as well. It's like with the way that disposable income has been last handful of years, period. I'm not just talking about, right now in the present tense, but I'm just talking about over the last handful of years, there's been discussions about franchises, teams, and leagues pricing out the middle class, however you want to phrase that, however you want to classify that particular quote. So you're going to have empty seats, and it could be for a bunch of different reasons. But at the same time, if a team is not doing well, you're going to decide to take your disposable income and put it in other places. And it's going to take the effort from that particular team to try and draw you back, whatever that entails.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a reality. You're not going to go spend your time and money on what you perceive to be a bad product. That's just the reality. You can still, and that's the difference between a bad movie and a bad sports team, is you can still consume the product in a different way without being in the building. You can still watch, you can still listen, you can still read, you can still keep up with it. And that's what I think happens a lot of times. Now, when it's a long-term thing, then you start to see people drift away because they're not as engaged.
Right.
The engagement becomes key at that point, and measuring that is a little bit harder to do.
Tafka says on attendance, don't forget we have tens of thousands of people on the wait list for season tickets.
Exactly.
Would some people not renew after a poor season? Yes. Are there more than enough fans waiting to take that ticket at the first opportunity? Hell yes, in all caps.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is in a long-term basis like we've seen in Houston, you're having a different conversation. But a one-year blip, no. It's not going to be anything dramatic. Are you going to have some empty seats at games because people who have season tickets either don't go or can't sell them to somebody else? Yeah, it'll happen. You see it at times on a midweek game anyway. I mean, it's just something that happens. It's part of the life of a professional club. It's what makes things difficult sometimes. So it's just part of it. You watch any team in the world. I mean, Manchester City is a great club that doesn't have a long history of excellence, but yeah, they struggle on midweek games at times. It happens. But if you have a bad product, you're going to have more struggles. That's for sure.
Going back to the topic that we had in hour one about European teams and survival and things like that, Tafka says, if MLS did not have a single entity structure, I think Nashville and others would be sunk due to this. Another reason why the structure is not the evil many believe.
Yeah, but I completely disagree about Nashville because of the ownership. Because that's the second level you're looking at. I mean, anytime you're going to launch a team like Nashville, of course they've had awful luck in launching into this, but you're going to have some losses early on. You're not expecting to make money straight away. So, they're fine. They're built to succeed over time. So this year doesn't really, honestly, dramatically change much of anything for Nashville. Ownership is very well resourced. I think all of the newer teams that have come into the league, it's one of the reasons why the fee to get in is high. The vetting is substantial because you have to be able to sustain during times like this. So I think the newer teams are fine. It's honestly a team like a Philadelphia that would be more of a concern outside of MLS's structure because you have an owner who's not as well resourced as others. But ultimately, even taking the structure out of it for a second when it comes to MLS, the teams that you had that had significant losses, and this is according to Forbes without seeing the books because they're not public, were two teams that could sustain those losses. The two that had the largest losses, according to Forbes, were New York City and Toronto. Well, one of the big reasons why New York City would have a loss is playing games at Yankee Stadium because you're paying a large amount to play there. Well, you're not going to have that if you're not playing games. So that's one thing that helps you, and they also have an ownership that can deal with it. Toronto's ownership, they would have the issue that some teams in Europe are facing right now with large salaries and no revenue to come in to pay them. They would be the one that would be in the bigger spot to deal with it because of the way they've built their team. But they're also an ownership that is well-resourced, so you would think that they would be able to handle that. Outside of that, you're not talking about huge amounts of losses. And if you have teams that don't have huge amounts of losses, they're going to be able to sustain these situations a little bit better than others. So I think in general, MLS would be fine even without it. But with the structure, what I look at with MLS is they're going to be in a position to potentially buy players that they might not have thought would be in their price range or be available before. And that's the conversation MLS owners need to be having. Like, I know you've got to deal with getting as many games played as possible because of how it affects your bottom line. That is a key conversation for Major League Soccer to have right now. You want to play as many games as you can in 2020. But from a long-term perspective, one of the number one things we've always talked about is if you keep increasing the level of play, if you keep bringing in top players into this league, you're going to attract more money on TV. You're going to attract more attention from people in this country. You're going to have potentially the ability to get players now that you were not able to get before. And mentioned it before, Sky Sports, you've got agents, you've got people thinking this could be a buyer's market. MLS, if they can handle this and they can make the case for the investment, man, this could be a spot where they could jump some positions pretty quickly because you're going to be able to go get some players that, for two reasons. I mean, and part of it is going to be depending on how the country handles this crisis as a whole, but there are other countries who are not going to handle this crisis as well, and you could have people who want to come to the United States in general. Two, you could have the league more stable and able to pay comparatively much better than they could before all this happened. So it's going to be interesting about the MLS side of it, how they choose to play this, because they could really make some strides if they come out of this the right way and they come out of this with a plan.
And I think that if you applied, if my math is correct, if you applied the TV, the share of TV revenue per franchise to the teams that recorded a loss, I think you only had 4 teams that still operated in anything close to a $5 million loss or greater. And you mentioned 2 of them, in NYCFC and Toronto. The other 2 were Chicago and Montreal. And pulling in the TV share, their operating loss was less than 8 figures. Everybody else was either even or operating income was at a profit.
Yeah, I mean, nobody was operating in a nasty financial position that you're going to be in big trouble with this. So it's going to be doable. MLS will be in a position to come out of this in a strong way if they prepare for it.
A couple of other folks have brought in their number one seeds for greatest wins this morning. Ricky Ricardo has his top four seeds as MLS Cup win, Eastern Conference Final with Red Bulls, Five Stripes After Dark in San Jose, and the 2017 win against Minnesota.
Yeah, and that's going to get the same argument that a lot of people gave me about Yamil Assad's goal in the opener being in the goal tournament. Like, I don't think it would have gotten past the first round if it had been in there, depending on the matchup. But it's all because of sentiment. And that first win will, in this, where almost every win is getting into the tournament, that first win will get, I would guess, past the first round. Depending on the matchup it gets. But yeah, it's got meaning to people because of that. And it was a big win, and it was a first hat trick for Josef. So there's some elements to it that are interesting. I don't know if it gets seeded, though. I don't know if it gets seeded in the top 4. It's on my list for consideration for the top 16. But I don't know if it's going to get there yet.
Yeah, I think that the top 16, I think that you can pretty much figure out, and there might be a little wiggle room down toward the bottom.
There's a lot of wiggle room. No.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, we went through a bunch of games. So right now, on my list, 16 is the top 4 seeds in each section of the bracket. Right. I've got 4, 7, 11, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. I got 25 games written down.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not easy to get to 16.
Because, I mean, we talked through 16 pretty quickly, and then...
No.
Well, when Mike was on, we went through 16 pretty quick.
You need caffeine to keep up, my friend. Those are the games we went through. 25 different games. It's not that easy.
Can't wait to see what it looks like, though.
Yeah, you're probably going to be one of the people tweeting at me arguing.
Might be texting, because I think I know how to get in touch with you. Or I might do it.
Straight the leg. You have a problem with that, Sensei? No mercy.
That's my reaction to everybody.
Yeah, bring it. Chris Hutchison, by the way, says Cappuccino and Topo Chico for the win.
Yeah. It worked out, though. The Cappuccino was really good. Now I want cappuccino, and I'm not able to have cappuccino.
Kefsey says it makes sense that we could say that the Club America Campeones Cup was one of the greatest games, but not one of the greatest wins, right?
I think there's a case for it to be among one of the greatest
I'm adding
wins.
Context, and that's why I had it as one of my top 4 seeds.
But what context are you adding?
Beating a Liga MX side in your building, a young franchise going up against Club America, winning a trophy. So I'm putting all of those in there.
Okay, now hold on. Let's play. Let me play Skip Bayless at you for a second. Winning a trophy. Yes, there was a trophy that was handed over. Is it the same as winning other trophies? No, it's not. It's not quite the same.
Skip.
It's not quite the same. I put the Open Cup win ahead of it. Obviously, the MLS Cup win I put ahead of it. I'll be curious to see if that wins the bracket. Because in terms of the quality of the win, was it the best? Maybe not. You could make that argument. There were better performances in other games, yeah. There were maybe games that you beat better opponents, yep. But it's freaking MLS Cup. Now that's context. Campeones Cup is not that. But it's a big win. And that's one that I'll be really curious to see how that one gets voted.
Tafka's Cinderella pick is the 6-1 win over Minnesota in the snow. Why? Every single fan was still in the what do we have in this club mode. And to set the tone for the whole season after that, also first ever win, first Josef hat-trick. Everyone remembers this game.
Yeah, that's been brought up multiple times now. And I kind of had it towards the bottom of just from thinking about it. I kind of had it in that one of the last 4 seeds But now I'm starting to think maybe that needs to be a little bit higher. I don't think it becomes a top, like a 2 seed. Because you got to remember the way you do a bracket. You have 4 number 1 seeds, you have 4 number 2s, you have 4 number 3s, so on and so forth. Like, I don't think it becomes a 2 seed, but it could be a 3, potentially.
I can see that. Tafka says, I remember sitting down at the bar after the 4th goal and thinking, oh, blank, this club's really going to be something way bigger than what anyone was expecting.
Now, see, I didn't think that because I knew Minnesota was crap. I mean, let's just be real. Minnesota, at that point, holy good.
The Scandinavian gambit did not work out for them.
You always want to throw shade at Scandinavians because of this.
I'm half Scandinavian.
ABBA?
I can do
Why
that.
Do you hate ABBA?
I do not hate ABBA.
Why do you hate AHA?
I don't hate AHA. I thought that Hunting High and Low was a tremendous album beginning to end, and when they come back here to the States, I'm going to try and find them on tour.
You always trash the Scandinavian portion of this.
It was a poor selection of players, and Vadim Demidov will always be a part of that discussion as well.
Poor Vadim Demidov. It's all about throwing the shade at him. It's all about poor Vadim Demidov.
Alvabage, Demidov.
Well, Alvabage got his leg opened up at the end of it, so I do feel a little bit bad for him.
That was just a bad gambit for assembling a side. It just didn't work.
Your word of the day is gambit, I see.
Gambit! Let's see.
I don't think you have the facilities for that, big man.
Minnesota did not have the facilities. No, they did not have the facilities for anything at that point because it is a bad team. And they didn't construct their roster well, and excuses were made for them. And look, they figured it out. They were very good last year. They have the potential to have a very good 2020. I like what they've done since, but at that stage, they were horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were, I think, if I remember correctly, the first team in MLS history up to that point to concede 10 goals in 2 games. And they conceded 11.
Because it's one more than 10.
Well, no. Let me explain this to you real quickly. I know it's difficult. So when they conceded the 5th goal in the match, after conceding 5 goals in week 1, that was the 10th goal. And at that time, they were the only team to ever concede 10 goals in 2 games. Well, then they went and conceded another one because they forgot to mark Jacob Peterson. So that made it 11. But when it got to 10, they had already broken a record.
It was not very good. That was not good soccer that they were playing.
Yeah, so I would push back on the reaction, and I don't think we all really knew at this point, but I knew Minnesota was crap. So I wasn't thinking like, oh, this team's really, really good. I was thinking, okay, that's a really good performance in the snow, and man, Minnesota sucks. That's what I was thinking after that game.
And Chris Hutchison, going back to matches for seeding here, he says, I still remember Joseph Martinez throwing the face mask away during the first game he wore it.
That was the game after that Columbus game in 2018, because it was that game where he went up for the header, and I can't remember who it was, kind of in front of him, jumped late and just crushed his nose. And then the next game after that, Joseph wore the face mask and threw it off midway through because he didn't like it.
Jean has come in this morning. And
how many Jeans?
She, 3 different spellings. Cool. Jean, like I dream of Genie, Jeanne, and then Gene. Jean.
Hat trick.
That. Yes, that is the Gene hat trick. Very good. ATLUTDTID. And Gene is waiting still 2+ years to get season tickets. Meanwhile, we've sat all over the stadium, loved it every time. And she says, I miss going to games right now.
Yep, we all do. I will be glad when we have games to talk about, and don't know when that's going to be. I mean, everybody's paying attention to everything coming out right now. I think in the short term, it's going to look a whole lot worse before we get to the other side of this. And I think everybody's starting to understand that and prepare for it. I don't know if that affects the timeline, and that's the one thing that I would caution right now, is this is just something that is part of the lifespan of this. And, you know, it is what it is. No matter what you do right now, you're already in the midst of it. But the things we're doing right now are very important for getting back to normal as quickly as possible. And that's what I hope everybody is doing, and following the instructions and paying attention to their surroundings and avoiding situations where either you can catch this thing or share this thing if you have it and you don't know. And there's probably a lot of people in that boat. That's just where we're at right now. So all of the actions right now, they're not going to affect the numbers we're going to hear about that are going to be scary, that are going to be bad. But those numbers right now also don't affect how quickly we can get back. You can't get distracted by those, and you can't get, I hate to say it, you can't get down on about numbers. You've got to stay focused on doing what it takes right now to slow the spread of this and to allow all of us to get back to normal at some point. You know, if that means, you know, not having a house party, if that means not going to a crowded Beltline, if that means not going to a crowded park, whatever that means, please do that for everybody, because it's about not spreading this virus. It's about allowing people to get back to work. It's all of that. And don't get distracted by the scary things that are about to come. And I think we all know kind of where things are heading in terms of the illness that has already spread. Right now is the time to focus on not spreading it further and getting as back to normal as we can. Because look, I mean, I want to get back to games. I know everybody wants that. The quicker we can get through it, the quicker we can deal with these issues that we're all facing right now, the quicker things can get back to normal. And I think one thing that we've all learned through this is the power of sport and the power of this sport that we all love so much, and how important it is to our mood, to our lifestyle, to our friendships, to our social network, all of it. And I know we all want to get back to it as soon as possible. So, you know, if we all follow what's out there and follow, you know, the instructions that we've been given, hopefully we can do that, because it's not going to happen if we can't do that. It's just not. It's not going to happen anytime soon if we can't follow the instructions that have been given about all this. We have to stay home. We have to avoid groups. We have to do those things to allow this cycle to end, and so we can get back to normal.
And shout out really to all of the first responders who are facing this every single day, to all of the essential workers who are facing this every single day. They do amazing work on a daily basis, and just keep them in your thoughts and give them the best amount of love that you can, considering what they're doing every day to make sure that we can all get back to where we were.
Yep, and hopefully that will be coming here at some point, but we don't know when. We're going to do our best to keep putting out product for you, keep putting out content, doing morning shows, doing other podcasts. I'm trying to do more from a historical perspective as different things pop up. If you guys have suggestions, you have things you'd like for us to tackle, please give us a heads up. Shoot us a message on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. Email is soccerdownhere@gmail.com. You've got, our individual information. We've got a couple different things that are kind of in the pipeline. Hopefully we'll have a watch along tomorrow evening with some special guests, but we're all kind of figuring this out as we go. So if there's things you'd like for us to deliver to you in terms of content, please let us know, and we'll get cracking on it. I know John's got some things that he's working on in terms of USL League 2. We're waiting to hear a little bit more from USL on that and what their potential 2020 could look like. I've got some historical things that I've been working through and trying to drop more soccer files. It's what we're working on. We're all trying to keep busy and also, wherever we can be a distraction from all of this. If that's what we are right now, if we can be that distraction for you, we'd love to do it. So thanks to all of you guys who have spread the word and mentioned us as a podcast that you listen to, as a show you listen to. It means a lot. Thank you. And we'll still be here. We're not going anywhere. So we will have more for you tomorrow morning. Maybe some more in between, but we'll have more for you tomorrow morning for sure. Later today, Facebook.com/929thegame. We'll have stoppage time. Myself, Mike Conti, Jimmy Vance will be from our remote studios, and I think the sound will actually work properly this time now that I've learned some production tricks. So that'll be at 2 o'clock. But tomorrow, Soccer Down here, 9 o'clock in the morning, and hopefully a watch along later in the day. So until then, mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata, y'all.